Glenn Greenwald, of course, the reporter that broke the story about the NSA and Edward Snowden. He works for The Guardian. Now, he's in Brazil and he has a partner, David Miranda. Not a partner in terms of a reporting partner, but in terms of a relationship partner. He is going out with David Miranda. Now, David Miranda went to Germany. Now, here's where the story gets a little interesting. He went and talked to Laura Poitras, who is working with Glenn Greenwald on the NSA story. Now, he's flying back through London's Heathrow airport when the British authorities all of a sudden start playing the song of the Lannisters. And David Miranda's going, what is going on? And he looks at a British Guards thing and he's got chainmail there. This is all, if you, of course, watch Game of Thrones, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But the point being that the British authorities have pulled David Miranda aside. Now, some of you might think, well, look, if he went to go talk to someone who might have information about Edward Snowden, and Edward Snowden is releasing information about Great Britain, well, that might be logical. But you have to understand something. He's being pulled aside under the auspices of Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act of 2000. Now, is David Miranda a terrorist? Of course not. His main, apparently, thing that he's being suspected of is A, being in some sort of relationship with Glenn Greenwald, who's a journalist who's breaking these stories, and B, maybe engaging in journalism himself. How dare he? Keep that in mind. This is not an act that targets journalists and you say, well, he might have committed an act of journalism. It's supposed to target terrorists. Now, this is where, of course, people get livid, understandably so. Now, not only did they detain him, but they took all the material that he had with him, cell phones, laptops, memory sticks, etc. Gone. They just took it. Sad day, it's not yours anymore. It's the property of the British government. And now, are you allowed to do that? And then they kept him for 9 hours. That is literally the longest by law that you are allowed to keep someone. There he is returning to Brazil and meeting Glenn Greenwald. Obviously, at some point, they let him go. But understand how strange it is to keep someone for 9 hours. The overwhelming majority of actual terrorist suspects, people that they think might be involved in terrorism, are kept for under 1 hour. In only 1 out of 2,000 cases do they keep somebody for 9 hours. Gee, I wonder if this was vindictive. They already had the cell phones and the laptops in the first 5 minutes. The rest of it is basically saying, Glenn Greenwald, how dare you do journalism? We'll not only come after you, but we'll come after everyone associated with you, whether they're working on this story or perhaps even if they're not working on this story, and this is the person that you care deeply about, so maybe we'll treat him worse than the great majority of the terrorist suspects, people we suspect of possible terrorism. We'll treat him worse than them. Unbelievable. So, of course, Glenn Greenwald, along with everyone else, is livid over it. He says to start detaining family members and loved ones of journalists is simply despotic. He continues, even if the mafia had ethical rules against targeting the family members of people they feel threatened by, but the UK puppets and their owners in the US national security state obviously are unconstrained by even those minimal scruples. Hard to argue with that. And then he goes on to be more clear. Now, first, we're going to see David Miranda and see what he experienced, and then we'll go on to what Glenn Greenwald experienced. Let's watch.
Fiquei numa sala, tiveram 6 agentes diferentes que eles estavam entrando e saindo, falando comigo, me fizeram perguntas sobre minha vida inteira, sobre tudo, levaram meu computador, videogame, celular, meus memory cards que estavam, tudo.
All right. Now, as you can see there, he went through a harrowing experience, not in that he thought his life was in danger, but do we have to really get to that point? But as in, why are they doing this? Why are they treating me like a terrorist? And now Glenn Greenwald says, if two can play at that game, I'd like to send my regards as well.
Eu vou fazer a reportagem com muito mais agressão do que antes. Eu vou publicar muito mais documentos do que antes. Eu vou publicar muitas coisas sobre a Inglaterra também. Eu tenho muitos documentos sobre o sistema de espionagem da Inglaterra.
So, look, you want to start treating people this way and trying to intimidate people's loved ones? Well, I got more information in UK. If you'd like to step right into it, have at it, Hoss. You think you're going to intimidate me? Now, remember, Glenn Greenwald is the guy that private contractors tried to investigate earlier on, well before he did any of these NSA stories, because they viewed him to be a threat. And they were trying to look into his personal life back then. And basically, when we found out about it and that became public, Glenn Greenwald said, yeah, okay, you got me, I'm gay. Everybody already knew that. Sad day for you. You don't have anything on me. He's used to being a target. And this, of course, goes beyond the pale. But it actually goes to prove that he's right. And here, let me quote Glenn again. He says, every time the U.S. and U.K. governments show their true character to the world, when they prevent the Bolivian president's plane from flying safely home, when they threaten journalists with prosecution, when they engage in behavior like what they did today. And all they do is hopefully underscore why it's so dangerous to allow them to exercise vast, unchecked spying power in the dark. You see, I think that's the best quote. Because do you trust this government now? Do you really think that they're using the Terrorism Acts in the UK to try to find actual terrorists? Or do you think that they're using it to try to intimidate journalists? The number one crime is a crime where you embarrass the government. How dare you? It's true in the US and it's true in the UK. You're going to try to reveal our information about what we're doing to our own citizens or what the Americans are doing to their citizens? How dare you? That makes you worse than a terrorist. But by doing that, you show us what your true colors are. I'm now scared of my own government. If you live in the UK, you should be scared of your government because they view you as the enemy. The greatest crime Glenn Greenwald and Edward Snowden did was to reveal information to the public. And now Snowden being charged with revealing information to the enemy. You do the math on that. Greenwald also says they wanted to intimidate our journalism to show that they have power and will not remain passive, but will attack us with more intensely if we continue publishing their secrets. That is true. It does not look like it worked. They are not at all intimidated. But it's not just about Glenn Greenwald or The Guardian. It's also about how power is abused within the different governments and against other governments. For example, David Miranda is a citizen of Brazil, and Brazil is understandably livid over it. Here's what they say. The Brazilian government expresses grave concern about the episode that happened today in London, where a Brazilian citizen was held without communication at Heathrow Airport for 9 hours in an action based in the British anti-terrorism legislation. The measure is without justification since it involves an individual against whom there are no charges that can legitimate the use of that legislation. This is basically Brazil saying, whoa, let me understand how you're using and abusing your power. You're saying that if any of my citizens come through and you know they're not terrorists and you know you're not going to charge them with that, you're going to misuse your law to hold them for 9 hours on that piece of so-called legislation anyway. So I guess none of my citizens are safe in the UK, and you could double that for the US. Now, this is absolutely outrageous, man. They've made it so that we can't trust our government at all because it's not our government. It's the government that's trying to protect itself and make sure we don't get the information. And if they gotta, in some ways, terrorize journalists and their loved ones to do it, they have no problem doing that. To treat people who are trying to give us information worse than you treat terrorist suspects, it's beyond the pale. But unfortunately, it's exactly what the US and UK governments have been doing for a long time.